So welcome, everybody. It is fabulous to be with you here tonight, and I thank you so much for joining me. I am a very informal person and very casual, so I'm happy for this to be as much of a discussion as you like, as well as me just talking. So any questions, anything you would like to ask or comment on, please do. You can unmute yourselves or type it into the chat box as well. So please close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. And take a breath in, a slow, deep breath in. And a slow, deep breath out. And become aware of your heart center in the middle of your chest. Maybe put a hand on your heart center to connect, to help in your awareness of your heart. And take a breath in with the awareness that you're breathing into your heart. And as you breathe out, you're breathing out from your heart. Slow, deep breaths, as comfortably, as deeply as you can, without forcing the breath. Slowly and deeply into your heart. And every breath taking you deeper into your heart, into the awareness of your heart. And become aware of the sensation in your heart, whatever it is that you feel. And become aware of the texture of your heart, whatever that may be for you. And become aware of the weight of your heart. And become aware of the sound of your heart. And become aware of the color of your heart. And take a deeper breath in. And slowly breathe out. And slowly open your eyes. So sexual freedom is such a fascinating topic. There are so many different aspects to it, so many different ways to look at sexual freedom, so many different elements of it, and so many different expressions of sexual freedom. And we're going to look at some of those tonight. So for me, the kind of connection with this always is it's Passover on the weekend. And for me, it's more of a family thing than a religious thing. And we always talk about freedom in this time, what freedom means, what it means to us on a personal level. And the journey to freedom is very much the journey of healing. It's the journey of growth. It's the journey of experience. And freedom is allowing ourselves the experience of life in every moment, allowing ourselves the experience of our bodies, experience of our hearts, the experience of what we feel, of sensation, of the world in that moment. And every moment has the ability or has the possibility of freedom. So the framework that I work in is very much one of understanding that so much of what we do, everything that we do, comes from patterns, comes from conditioning. So the patterns that we live with are in our mind and they're in our bodies. And that's so important when it comes to exploring sexuality, sensuality, sensation, emotion, feeling, because the mind has the beliefs that it has, and it has all of the thoughts and all the patterns of the mind, all the loops and the hamster wheels that go round and round and round, and all the conditioning that we have been given about sex and the way that we have sex and who we have sex with and the kind of sex that we have and the labels we put on sex. And that's a really big one when it comes to freedom. So we're going to come back and talk about that. But so many of the patterns are in our bodies, which means that our body does what it's been patterned and conditioned to do in so many sexual situations. And we have sex in pretty much the same way. We kiss in the same way, we touch in the same way. And that keeps us having sex in the pattern that we have sex in. Most of our patterns are subconscious. We're not aware of them. And it's often only when we have some kind of issue, some kind of problem, or we start some kind of growth path that we start to become aware of the patterns. And the deeper we go into this, the more aware we become of how deep the patterns are, how subtle they are, and how deeply they go. And this is an endless journey of exploration. And I look at the past week in my life, which has been a deep introspective time. And the awareness of the subtlety of some patterns and how they are being expressed is amazing. So once we have that understanding, it allows us to do so much in terms of self-exploration, in terms of self-inquiry. But the important thing in freedom is that when we are in a pattern, there's no freedom. We're simply in a pattern, and we are simply doing what it is that we have done. And our patterns have nothing to do with happiness. They have nothing to do with fulfillment. They have nothing to do with freedom. They have nothing to do with anything other than keeping us in the pattern. And that's how we live. So an enormous part of our mind is concerned with safety. It's concerned with survival. And that keeps us doing what we know simply because we know it. So to understand a little bit of this, it becomes important to understand energy, because the field of possibility is the field of energy. And the field of possibility becomes the field of freedom. So everything in our world has a frequency. Every color has a frequency. So I can see Red is wearing a blue top. I'm wearing an orange top, different frequency, different colors. Every sound has a frequency. If you listen to heavy metal music, you listen to classical music, it's going to be very, very different. Every organ in the body has a range of optimal health. Anything above or below that is not healthy. Every emotion has a frequency, and the frequency of emotion is the same in all of us. The triggers are different. So what makes you anxious is different to what makes me anxious. But the pattern of anxiety is the same in all of us. Everything that we do, everything that's been done to us falls into a frequency. And these frequencies keep us doing the same things because we stay in the same energy field. So it's like a river that needs to flow. If the water's not flowing, behind where it gets blocked, it gets dirty and nasty and full of mosquitoes and all sorts of junk builds up there. Those become the points of blockage in our lives that keep us doing the same thing, that keep us having the same experiences, that keep us having the same relationships, that keep us having the same kind of relationships and attracting the same kind of people in our lives. And that keeps us in the pattern, it keeps us in the conditioning. So when we understand how deeply this is, we can start to understand, and we can start to, through awareness is where we start to change that. And the first thing in that is becoming aware of the patterns that we have. And they'll start with the bigger patterns because they're kind of easier to identify. And over time, we get more subtle, we get more aware of that. But when we're staying in the pattern, everything that we do is going to be pretty much the same in our bodies and in our minds. So much of the conditioning around sex comes from family, it comes from religion, it comes from so many social institutions, and so much of that is based on the judgment of sex, of how you have sex, of the things that you do sexually, of who you have sex with, who you can't have sex with, what it all means. And that's where so many of our labels come from. And the labels become such a limitation and an inhibition to freedom. That once we decide that we are this and we are that and we are not this and we are not that, that cuts out so many possibilities and simply keeps us doing the same thing that we do in the same way over and over and keeps us in the pattern. And a lot of our patterns serve us. A lot of them are creative, a lot are expansive, a lot are about our health. There's no question of that. But a lot of them keep us from being free. And it's so important to connect sex and life, to connect sex and the heart, to connect sex and spirit, especially when we come to the idea of sexual freedom. Because our sexuality is not in a vacuum. It's not separate from everything that we are. It's not separate from every other part of life. It's not in this little box that we bring out in very specific circumstances, in very specific contexts, and we use it, and then we put it away again. Our sexuality is connected to all that we are and expresses itself in so many aspects of our lives. And when we begin to explore consciousness, when we begin to explore healing, when we begin to explore other ways of living and the possibilities in all of these, we start to become freer in every way. So when we become freer in terms of how we think about relationship, for example, that starts to give us greater sexual freedom. When we start to become creatively freer, that gives us more creativity in our sexuality. So everything joins together in this amazing expansion to help us access greater freedom, which is greater choice. And from there, we can create, we can have the experiences that will bring us greater fulfillment, greater happiness, more intimacy, more excitement, whatever it is that we're looking for. And this requires us to go beyond what we know, because freedom is in the unknown. So that's really important, that freedom is in the unknown. That every time we have an experience that we are willing to go into the unknown, where we're willing to go into sensation, we're willing to go into emotion, we're willing to go into a different idea, into a different expression, where we're willing to go into possibility, we take ourselves out of patterning, we take ourselves out of conditioning, and we take ourselves into the field of possibility. And the more time that we spend in that field, the greater the freedom that we experience. And that happens through our body, through our mind, and through our heart. And that means allowing ourselves to go beyond what we think sex is, to go beyond what we think love is, to go beyond what we think the connection between sex and love and spirit and life and all of those are. And that's not to say that what we think is wrong. It simply says, when we're willing to go beyond, we go to a place where we open to possibility. And that's where we start to expand the experiences that we have. And for many of us, that comes with fear because we don't know what we're going to find there. We don't know what we're going to find within ourselves. We don't know what we're going to see within ourselves. We don't know what we're going to release within ourselves. And very often in the past, we've had little glimpses of what's there. We've had little glimpses of the power, of the possibility. We've had glimpses of parts of ourselves that might have terrified us because we have no idea what to do with them, and because we've been given such judgment on these parts of ourselves. And very often we call these the darker parts or the shadow parts. And so often when we allow ourselves the expression, the intimacy, the connection with those parts of ourselves, it almost feels in a way like we're coming home. And we're able to drop so much of the armor that we carry, the masks that we carry, the expectations. And that's a really big thing that keeps us from freedom in our sexual and sensual expression is expectations, particularly the expectations of others. And very often these are presumed expectations, because so often we have all the ideas of what people expect from us without actually talking about it. So we just kind of make up all of these stories because we think everybody thinks the same way that we do. So we assume that everybody looks at things in exactly the same way, without understanding that the perspective we each bring is so unique. And when we allow ourselves to have these experiences, to drop the expectation, to not get caught up in the outcome of the experience, that becomes important. So there's an interesting thing, at the beginning of almost every workshop that I do, not almost every workshop, we go around the room or wherever we are, and we talk about what everybody's there for, what brought them there, what they want. And people say whatever it is that they're going to say. And there are times where we'll go around 4 or 5 times until people start to say, this is why I'm here. Until then, it's kind of lots of nice stuff and all the things we want to hear, until we get to, this is the real stuff. But beyond that, we all have expectations. Even when somebody walks in and says, I have no expectation, because I don't know that it's not human not to have an expectation. It's important not to get hung up on the expectation or the outcome of the expectation. And when we start exploring, that becomes so important. That we allow ourselves the experience. And that's where so much of the freedom is. So one of the definitions, or the definition of conscious sexuality that I work with, is that it's being present during sex, fully present in your mind, in your body, in your heart, and allowing whatever arises to be there. And allowing whatever arises to be there. And that gets really interesting, because sometimes the experiences bring up fear. Sometimes they bring up anger. Sometimes they bring up absolute fire. And sometimes they bring up terror. And the range of everything. So it's allowing whatever it is to be there, to be there. And this is where it starts to get absolutely fascinating. When we allow ourselves this, then we allow ourselves freedom. And it becomes fascinating when I think lately of quite a few people that I've been working with, and we started doing some quite deep throat work. And so many people have said, as soon as they felt my hand on their throat and it squeezes just a little, this power that they felt becomes amazing. And then some of the mind kicks in, because what does this mean? And then there's the shadow, and then there's the dark, and then there's all of the stuff that takes us back into contraction. And when we relax into that, that's when we allow the opening. So it's allowing what we feel to be there. And that becomes the most amazing freedom, because it's not an expectation. It's not how an experience should be. It's what the experience is in the moment, and it's who and where we are in the moment. And there is such beauty in that. And the more that we can express that, the more we can feel that, sense that, the more we can communicate that, the more our hearts start to open, the more our voices start to open. And the more we become willing to explore, the more we become willing to go into the experiences, to go deeper. And then we start to see how we can release the labels that we've had. And the labels are such a huge part of our sexuality. That I'm gay, that I'm straight, that I'm bi, that I'm queer, that I'm a dom, that I'm a sub, that I'm a... so many different labels. And we did a water massage experience the other night, and I shared a story that's really appropriate about these labels. I was at a sex club one night, and I've shared that I was involved in running a club for quite a while, and a long time ago, which was an amazing learning experience, especially about sexual freedom, because it had the most amazing range of people doing the most amazing things. And it was fascinating to see the difference kind of between authenticity, what people were doing to please their partners, what people were doing for so many different reasons, as opposed to absolutely claiming freedom. But I was sitting there, it was late on a Saturday night, and a guy comes up to me who'd been there quite a lot. I knew him quite well. And he said, I just had one of the most beautiful and one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. And I said, yeah, what happened? So at the club, there is a dark room, and the dark room is really dark. When you're in it, you can't see half a meter in front of your face, and that's the purpose of it. And he said he was lying there, and somebody started giving him a blowjob, and it was the most amazing blowjob he had experienced in his life. He'd never felt anything like this. And when he was quite close to orgasm, he put his hand down and he felt the person who was there, and his shock was, it was a man. And he didn't know what to do with this. And he was absolutely, absolutely caught in the space of really wanting this to continue and of really wanting this amazing orgasm. But this absolute patterning of, what does it mean that this is a man, and everything around it? And he said he let it end. And then he was just so disturbed and at the same time absolutely amazed at the experience. And we spent hours talking, and came to such a beautiful place that all that it means is that it was an experience of pleasure. And so many experiences are just that. It doesn't mean we're this, it doesn't mean we're that, it doesn't mean we're not this or not that. It simply says we can open to experiences in so many ways with conscious choice that don't necessarily have or have to have the label of conditioning, the label of patterning. Even when we start exploring our own bodies and we find things that we never knew excited us, that we never knew aroused that we never knew felt so good. We allow ourselves free rein with our fantasies, and all of a sudden, things start coming to the surface, and some of them are shocking, but wow, they turn us on. And the freedom is in allowing ourselves these, and they don't take anything away from us. They add to us because they add to our creativity. They add to the possibility of experience. And when we give ourselves this fullness, we become better parents, we become better lovers, we become better at what we do because we allow ourselves more creativity. We allow ourselves more of our authenticity in every way. And we start seeing more of what connects us to people rather than what separates us. Because freedom is very much about connection and intimacy. And the first level of that is intimacy with ourselves. And the more we know ourselves, the greater freedom we have within ourselves. Because very often the opposite end of freedom is judgment. And when we start dropping those judgments about ourselves, we're able to drop the judgments about others. We're able to drop the judgments about what people do. And we get to the point of there's more that connects us than what separates us. And this is one of the reasons that I think so many people in our world fear the power of sexuality because of this level of freedom. And when we start expanding that and we start expanding how we see love and how we see relationship, and so much of our world lives in monogamous relationships. A lot of our world doesn't, and more people are questioning and exploring that. But I read something a little while ago that there are over 250 models of relationship in the world. And we kind of get stuck on one narrow channel of that. But when we start questioning that, we start to question quite a lot of the fabric of society. We start to question politics enormously. We start to question government. We start to question money. We start to question how we work. Because it simply says, if I'm claiming freedom in one part of my life, then I'd like more of that in other parts of my life. And that means I start looking at all of these things. So I start looking at maybe education, and I start looking at what are my kids learning and how would I like them to learn? And I start looking at how I work and what do I want to do in my work? And how can I make things work in different ways? And how can I live in different ways? So as connected to simply our sex and genital sexual freedom is, it's so much more than that. And it's a constant and endless journey of exploration. Even in the last 2 days, from the depths of, I don't know where, something new has started to emerge for me that I'll share with you in the days and weeks to come. Some of it is, I have been, a couple of weeks ago, we did a webinar on mouth massage. It's on my YouTube channel if you haven't watched it. And in that, I shared a practice of kissing life. And there's an expansion of that, of being kissed by life. And I was doing a meditation this afternoon, and this whole other thing emerged of this thing just called a melting kiss. So not having a lover at the moment, my lover is life. So I'm spending a lot of time kind of exploring the sensuality and sexuality of life. And the first level of this was understanding how to have this experience with a partner. And then it was how to have this experience with life. So let us do for a moment a melting kiss with life. So close your eyes, please. And become aware of your lips. And become aware of breathing into your lips. As you breathe into your lips soften. And as you breathe out, your lips relax. And with each breath, your awareness comes deeper into your lips. And with each breath, your lips soften. And with each exhale, your lips relax. And bring as much of your awareness into your lips as you can. So there's two ways that you can do this. The first is just have the awareness in your imagination that your lover, whoever that may be, is in front of you. And their lips are as soft as yours. And you keep breathing into your lips. Just have the awareness of your mouths coming closer, slowly, until you can feel their lips through the air. They're that close. And slowly, slowly, your lips touch theirs. And that's all that you do. And you keep breathing into your lips. And you keep, with each breath, your lips softening. And with each exhale, your lips relaxing into theirs. Just lips touching. And the other way is simply the awareness of life. And life is there, touching your lips. And with each breath, life softens. And with each breath, you soften. And life softens into your lips. And you soften into life. Take a breath in, a deep breath. And slowly open your eyes. What did you feel with that? I'd love to hear. Either unmute yourself or type it into the chat box. So intimate, so connected.
I'll talk. It's a very quiet audience tonight. I found it very defenseless, like a real softening and a real tenderness that came, almost like a dropping of some feeling of walls. And then there was a lot of quivering, like I kept on feeling like maybe there was something else wanting to arise, like some sadness or something. But yeah, it was quite interesting just to observe. I don't think I've really felt my lips like that before.
It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a beautiful practice to do, and you can keep doing it. And if something's going to arise, it's going to arise. Just with time, it will be there more. And our lips are amazing. They're so sensitive. And a part of it, so much of what we hold here is so much of what we've never said. So much of what we wanted to say and we've never said. So many words that sit here, so much tightness of lips. Whenever I do that, it makes me think. I had a lover a long time ago, and she said, never kiss me with chicken ass lips. It was like soft lips. But it's such a deep and beautiful practice, and it's so emotional, and it brings you into such presence. And through the practice, we go into deeper presence. And one of the thoughts around it today came up, and it's connected to freedom in a beautiful way, is we're so limited on who we can kiss and the way that we think we can kiss and how we think we can kiss. And we can only kiss people in this context. And we can't kiss him, can't kiss her. And it's like, has to be in this way instead of, this can be such an incredible sharing. But we have to take the story away from it. We have to take what it means in that. Feel so much life there, so much tingling, and amazing to breathe air into lips. Never done that before. That's beautiful. Thank you, Kim. Yeah, it's a really powerful practice, and such a simple practice on its own, but it's a deep one. So, and part of that is the exploration of so much of our body, that it's not always about our genitals, because we think so much of that is. And we think so much of sexual freedom often is in the extreme. And, when we start to free ourselves from the conditioning, from the patterning, we go and have every experience that we can think of. And we have threesome, and then we have foursome, and then we have an orgy. And just by the way, orgies are really hard work and generally overrated, in my opinion. Like, the fantasy is amazing, but smaller groups, nicer, a lot more fun, my opinion. But it's not always about the extreme. But sometimes those experiences are important because they do free us from patterning and conditioning. On Tuesday at the water flow massage. So some people get into the pool nude, and some people wear costumes, whatever they are comfortable with. And there was a couple there for the first time, and she said at the end she was really disappointed that she kept her costume on. And she'll come back next time, hopefully, and she'll have a different experience. But the awareness of that was so beautiful, in that the act of taking her costume off, or of being in the pool nude, frees us from so many things. And this is where we need to give ourselves the freedom to allow whatever arises in the experience to be there. Because some of the experiences bring up things that challenge us because of the beliefs, and it puts us in this kind of, the experience is almost like a portal to who we were before and who we're going to be afterwards. And that's such a fascinating idea. That's been around quite a lot this week. It came up in a book that I was reading, but it's how every massage that we do, every session, every workshop, every experience is a portal of this place between who we were and who we're going to be. And when we allow ourselves the freedom of the experience, of whatever it is that is in the experience, we're moving into something else, into being someone else. And that's a really beautiful and really fascinating place to be. And then we start to understand that the freedom of sensation, the freedom of emotion, the freedom of what we feel becomes so much deeper. Because in all this conditioning and patterning, we put kind of a limit on what we can feel, on what we can experience, on the amount of emotion, the amount of intimacy we'll allow. And for many of us, that's the scary place, is the power of that feeling, the power of that emotion. Can it take us, and can we allow it to take us to the place where we absolutely dissolve into that, where we have no more body. It's just us and energy. And I look back at many of those experiences in my life that continue to happen, going deeper into the journey, into my work and my experiences. And we see how limitless this is, how limitless our body is, how limitless this field of possibility actually is. And then we start to see how we can connect with anyone, how we can share, because so much of this freedom is linked to a vulnerability. And it's the vulnerability within ourselves to be open. And the vulnerability within ourselves to experience whatever it is that we experience, and to share all of who we are. And when we give ourselves that freedom, that's when we start to live, to have sex, to have pleasure, to have intimacy, connections, relationships, experiences, life in a very, very different way. And I think for tonight, that's what sexual freedom is. Yeah, thank you for that, Janet. It's a big one. And that's where the mouth massage is so powerful. Not only on our lips, but in our teeth, our gums, these muscles here in this joint, the temporomandibular joint, for most of us is just so tight. And it's, again, all those things we never said. But when this is tight, your lips are tight. And that's what so much of the release of all of that is, which is really, really beautiful.